Well, thank you so much for joining me. Today we have Rebecca Alvarez Story. She is a sexologist and the founder and CEO of Bloomi. Thanks so much for joining me today.
With you. Thank you for having me, Haley.
Yeah, I was when I met you a few months back, I was really happy and excited to kind of hear about your story and how Bloomy started, and also talk about sex in a different way. To give some people context, the first time that I ever met Rebecca was it was kind of an educational dinner. Do you have a specific name for those dinners or events that you do?
We call them intimate talk. It's just that we either do more of like a sip and learn where people can come have like alcoholic or non-alcoholic cocktails and it's more of a night vibe, or we do more of a sit down dinner. And I feel like those, from my experience, can get really personal. And those are the ones that I really like enjoy. You get to know people really well.
As I was saying, I just found the event so refreshing because as someone who goes to a lot of events like this, I it's often not very personal, and I loved the personal aspect and how you were able to kind of give advice on things that people don't really talk about or feel comfortable talking about. And today in this conversation, I just really wanted to touch base on something that I thought was really cool that you did, which was going back to the basics of sex. As someone who goes to a lot of events that are very hypersexualized, I would say, it was nice to go back and see talking about the very basics of sexuality, finding your own pleasure, and what that can mean for you and your partner if you have one. Um, so, I would love to talk about, in general, the idea of going back to the basics. What does that mean for you as a sexologist, and when you're talking to people about that idea?
Oh, I love that that was one of your takeaways. That makes me happy because I don't think I've ever heard it summarized that way, but that is essentially like one of the things I hope people take away. For me, I think now because I've heard and seen so much in sexual wellness and sex education, I feel like as a collective, we don't have an opportunity to sit down and just say, okay, I'm going to be here to absorb like the basic information that I feel like I should know to be confident and to start to make some of the decisions that really like ultimately guide your exploration and your pleasure. I find that there's almost this unrealistic switch that happens where as kids and teenagers, we may not get the best sex education or any sex education, which I think can be really dangerous, but we may not get a lot of information and then we go off to be young adults. A lot of us go on to college and it's a time of exploring, but with not as many tools as I feel like we should have. And then
Mhm.
now, fast forward even more into sexual relationships and like long term relationships or whatever you kind of go into as your next phase. And we're expected to just know stuff and flip a switch,
Yeah,
which I don't feel like
that's
is
so true.
fair. It's almost like go into this like relationship, fulfill each other, and have great sex, but you never really talked about how that was going to happen. So these spaces, I do feel like it is a lot of 101 that we cover, but it's so important to talk about those pieces. And then you saw like it'll kind of go into like it'll flow into like all these different areas.
Yeah, I noticed that everyone seemed a little, there's like an uncomfortability to talking about sex sometimes, especially if you're not in a space where you feel super confident in that. Um, and I saw people's eyes open up in a way, which was so cool. Like, I am someone who talks a lot about sex. I am not afraid to answer questions, but I forget that other people, like, there is this like unease about it, and it's so cool to be surrounded in a group of people who can confidently talk about it together and it not feel shameful or taboo or like a question is wrong. Because I think people tend to think, oh, this question might be stupid or I should know about this, but in reality, like you're saying, we don't have sex education programs that typically work. And we're not taught enough, and we're expected to figure it out on our own.
I was saying, I feel
Yeah.
that the work that you and I are both doing, it's adding to what hopefully becomes a normalized part of our life. And we can all say that having a conversation with a loved one is not a big deal. It's not awkward to answer a question. It's not awkward to buy a pleasure product. That's what I'm really hoping ultimately can happen from us hosting spaces like this, us talking about, a variety of sexual wellness topics.
Yeah, that's sort of my hope too. And I think for women especially, there is this need to be able to talk about these things because we should be able to access our own pleasure. When you're talking to women who are struggling to access even identifying what their pleasure means, what are the first things that you kind of recommend that they do?
Ah, such a good one. It's, I think with just a few questions, I can normally like get a sense of where the blockage is. So sometimes it's the messages that someone learned growing up, whether those were just, from like a cultural perspective, like you just shouldn't enjoy pleasure, or from a religious perspective, or really maybe just not even talking about it and having access to a conversation with somebody where you felt comfortable and safe to ask. So if that's the case, I think we just sort of like reset and I give them almost permission to unlearn and remind them of the health benefits of enjoying your body, of pleasure, and just kind of start there. That on its own can be a lot to process. The fact that someone is telling you it's healthy for you and you can still be very religious. You can still, decide you want to be abstinent until you're married. You can still do the things that maybe you feel like could contradict enjoying pleasure, but they can go hand in hand for people that have that as a concern. And then I would say, for others, it's not really about the messages. They might have had like a bad experience or they're turned off to self pleasure, either because their partner wasn't really supportive or gave them negative messages, or they themselves just didn't find and tap into that pleasure earlier when there's sexual exploration. So for that maybe type of person, what I would say is let's start some homework and let me give you some suggestions. And it doesn't have to be sexual pleasure in the beginning. You could just be other things just to feed your body things that feel good. And you can feel that release of hormones. That's like that. We call it a cocktail of feel good hormones, where it's like, oh, skin to skin can do this, or a scalp massage can do it, where you just feel a little lighter, release a little tension. That's sort of like building the muscle to really go into pleasure. And then
Mhm.
lastly, I would say there's some people who it's not about having a hang up necessarily. They just are a little bored. And whether that's bored in the relationship or bored in like their routine, they need novelty. They need like permission to like bring in fantasy and bring in things that they may be thinking about maybe unconsciously and don't get a chance to talk about because they're busy or tired. So for them, it's like a lot of exploration. I feel like that brings them joy and pleasure.
I like that you use the word exploration because I think that people don't often view it as exploration for themselves. It's just like, oh, this is what I should do, or this is how my sex drive should be. And if they're not there, they view it as a bad thing. How do you deal with those kinds of issues where people view sex as maybe like a chore or something to check off of a to-do list?
Yes. Ugh. If somebody feels that sex today is a chore, so much I want to tell you. Sex, just intimacy, it should be fun. It should be enjoyable and bring you an immense sense of like satisfaction. And yes, sexual satisfaction, but really just like, oh, that felt good. That was a good release. If that isn't happening for you, again, it's almost like I have to ask my questions like, are you in a relationship? Are you not in a relationship? So I can give them specific advice. But usually it means that you are in the routine of it and not enjoying things that are like those sparks and the things that are new, or you're too in your head about sex during sex. And a lot of people do this, especially women, cis women. We have this long to do list in our mind, and it's hard for us to really let go and just like be in the moment and be okay with our natural sounds and telling our partner what we want or how we want something. Like it's hard to really get into that moment if you're worried about things. And it could be something as simple as you're worried that roommate or a child is going to walk through the door. Like that's,
Mhm.
for some people it can be exciting, but for a lot of people it's like anxiety provoking. So if you are worried about things during intimacy so you can't really get into it, then you want to work on removing those distractions. Do you need intimacy time with your partner in a different time or for yourself at a different time of the day? Should you be exploring more in the shower? Like really making it like logistically easy for yourself is important. But then also, like, what are you using is what I would ask next. Like, are you using a lubricant to like really enhance the feel? Are you like craving a toy and wanting like vibration, maybe full body massages? Maybe you are really tired and stressed, which both of those impact your libido in a
Mhm.
negative way. So, do you need to like ground yourself before intimacy to really feel in your body and maybe use an arousal oil to help boost that circulation? So there's a lot you can do, but really, like, it's a great reminder, Haley, like, sex and intimacy, it should be enjoyable. And every time will be slightly different, right? But I just like to say, like, if you don't feel good after a session, reflect. Like, why not? What should I like do for the next time? Am I worried about something? Am I missing something?
Yeah, I something that is being talked about more that I love is scheduling out time for sex, which I think some people think is unsexy, but even I do it. And I'm just going into getting married in February, and my partner and I are long distance. So a lot of times it feels like we're scheduling sex. Um, and it's not unsexy. I think it's kind of fun to look forward to, oh, we're going to do this at this time, or we're going to go on a date, and we know that we have this time together to be intimate in the way that we want to. Do you often find yourself recommending scheduling sex?
All the time. For people who are thinking that it's not a good idea, it definitely works. So, from my experience, there's maybe like one thing to do before you go into like a cadence of scheduling. And then one tip that I have for people who are scheduling, like as newbies, I'll say, before you start scheduling sex, I really recommend that you schedule time to have fun with your partner. Because, especially for like long-term couples or people who are have a lot of like familial responsibilities and it's hard to find time with their partner, if you go from like task, work, and then up until like 5:59 p.m. and then 6 o'clock is sex time, but you haven't done anything to help yourself transition, or you haven't had any like lovely feeling moments with your partner, that's a hard switch to also turn on. Sometimes it's fine. Sometimes it's like, okay, good, let's just go for it. But most of the time, I would say it's really good to just make sure you're having fun with your partner. Like working out together can be really enjoyable for people. Having coffee in the morning before you really get going in the day, like flirty, fun text message throughout the day, just something that's like a hey, I love you, I'm excited for later. Moments can go a long way. And sometimes we just need to like go do fun things and like bring out that inner child and like really connect with our partner in like a fun, non sexual way. And that releases the same type of hormones actually. So I say that for the very, very, very busy people who find it challenging to go from like work mode to sex mode. So kind
Mhm.
of you need this like buffer and like to reintroduce all of that like fun love stuff. But then for people who are scheduling sex, it does work, because you kind of take off the table the worries of, are we going to have sex? Is this leading to sex? How do I look? Like all it's just like you guys are going to have sex, right? So you all are just already in the mood to do your homework essentially. But then I have heard from some people who schedule that they get anxiety about it. And to be honest, I think it's very healthy to talk about what's coming up before your appointment, because it'll be a signal that you need to readjust to something else. So for that couple in particular who just shared this with me, they needed more time for themselves because they were extremely tired. And that's so valid, so important. Sleep is like underrated, I feel like, and sleep and sex connection between both of these, it's so critical that you're rested.
Yeah, I mean, people like when you're tired, sex is kind of hard to do. You don't necessarily want to be engaging and you want to be present during sex as well. And if you're too tired, I just feel like it's really impossible to be present and remain like engaged in some way. And I also
Yeah.
think, when it comes to having anxiety about the scheduling, I think that's really interesting and probably something that a lot of people relate to. Um, I could see why that would cause some like level of worry or stress. But it's cool that they could then talk about it. I think, as always, communication is key in whatever you're doing with yourself and your partner. Like, check in with yourself and say, hey, what's going on with me today? Which kind of brings me to my next question, which is when people are just trying to find out what they like and explore by themselves, and they just really are starting from the very basics, what are some of your biggest tips of advice for people who are just starting out to kind of discover what it is that they like and also maybe unlearn some things that they think about sex or that they think about their own self pleasure?
Great question. I think depending on where you're starting, I would say the majority of people, like the tips that I share, will likely like apply or can be helpful in some way. But I will also say there's sometimes where people have really big blocks to pleasure and self-pleasure that could really benefit from some therapy. Sex therapist or just like a general therapist even that has some experience with body. So don't like, don't knock the power of a good therapist to help you through some of this. To start, what I would say is first just let's talk about what intimacy means. Intimacy does include sex, but it's not all about sex. So skin to skin, like your skin is the largest sex organ on the body. You want to make sure that you really nurture your full body when you're thinking of pleasure. And I like to start with a little bit of sexual homework, but a lot of non-sexual homework. So things that like get you into your own body. And when I say that, what I mean is feeling okay with like the touch, feeling okay with the heightened sensation, really paying attention to your breathing, paying attention to what's turning you on. In order to even be in that mindset, like I really encourage people to, we talked about this, but rest and have a good chunk of time that you're devoting to yourself. During that like solo time, what I love to tell people to do is pick like three things that you find really pleasurable. So, for example, I'm going to take a bath while I watch a 30-minute show that I love, or and with some like lavender in there. I'm really just going to like, like unwind. And then two, I'm going to take my time really rubbing massage oil or lotion all over my body. I'm going to do it multiple times and I'm going to enjoy that. And then three, I'm going to use a vibrator for the first time and I'm going to see how I feel after that and really reflect on all three experiences. So you can make those three whatever. They can be anything, but it's almost like unwind, ramp up, sex.
Mhm. It's nice to have those steps in a way too, because I think it gives you some sort of routine. Like, I love a routine, and I think that having like it almost feels like dating yourself, like how can I
Mhm.
like take myself on a date and
That's a great way to
and
put it.
feel, yeah, like good about being with me and exploring my body, but it doesn't have to be just about orgasming, which I think people think is the ultimate goal of self pleasure. It doesn't always have to be. And for me personally, I know when I was going through kind of figuring out what I liked at a young age, I had the misconception that, oh, if you're not orgasming in like 5 seconds, then like you're doing it wrong. Or if you feel like you have to put yourself in the mood, it's wrong. But I love that you are kind of approaching it so differently and in a healthy way. And I also think sex therapy helps as well. I'm always a big proponent of therapy.
Yeah, me too. I have a therapist. I've had a therapist probably like almost all my life because I love having like this professional talking space. I
Mhm.
like being able to talk with another person in a very like focused way. I highly encourage just to have one in general, but then if you have specific like sexual concerns that you're working through, I think it feels really nice to either have like a coach, like a sexologist or a sex therapist helping you through that.
Yeah, I I absolutely think that's great as well. I did want to talk a little bit about Bloomi too. I have gotten to try out some of the products that I was given at the event, and I love them all. And I actually gifted someone that's very close to me a vibrator, like I think it's like the mini vibrator, and also the lube that you gave, which is some this is a person who was kind of struggling to get back into self pleasure, and I gave it to them and they said that they loved it. So I'm super happy about that.
Oh,
But
I love
I wanted to
that.
talk a bit about your journey with Bloomy and how it's evolved and kind of changed your life as a sexologist.
Oh man, and Bloomy has definitely changed my life. I will say that. I reflected on this yesterday actually, just where it all started 5 years ago and thinking about starting a company to today where I very much deal with like business issues like any other business owner. But at the same time, because I am a sexologist and because I get so fulfilled and get like my cup is filled by having these conversations. So, like your podcast, for example, will probably be like the highlight of my day. Or
Mhm.
later today, we are going to a college campus and we're going to give out like 300 free vibrators to the students to really promote like sexual wellness on campus and tension relief and all of this. Those are my favorite parts. So what I have to say about Bloomi is just for people who don't know, Bloomi is an intimacy company. We say sexologist led just to share with people that there's a lot of fun expertise behind the brand. We make products that are made for all bodies. It's not for cis women or cis men. It's just for the body. It's for intimacy or intimate skin, plant based, as accessible as we could. And when we talk about accessibility, for me, it's not just price point. The brand is bilingual, English and Spanish. We have a big community of testers with different abilities that really test the products for us as well and give us great feedback. So I built this very intentional intimacy company. And over the years, I've seen it evolve. I started off really doing it bootstrapped and curating brands. And today we're venture backed and only carry Bloomy products and really like work with community to make solutions that they ask for. So I'm really proud of the evolution of the company, and like I feel like we are at the forefront in so many ways of helping to normalize intimacy and the conversations and buying the products. We launched nationwide at Target a year and a half ago. That's been a huge and exciting, like, contributor, I feel like, to us being like, able to normalize a lot of this. But with any, intimacy company, and also you add in Latina-led and raising venture, there's a lot of elements that go into a company like this in this category that are quite challenging. So I am pushing to really bring sex positivity to the world, but I'm also like pushing in a lot of ways people may not see to grow a business, and it's tough being the first. I've been the first a lot in my journey to do A, B, or C. And so I like to tell people because of that, I really try to bring other entrepreneurs like bring them with me. Like, okay, you're coming to this meeting with me just so you can sit in on this or whatever that is that I can do. Because it's been very much evolution for me too.
That's so wonderful. I actually spoke to someone from Steamy Lit yesterday, who I know you've worked with in the past.
Melissa,
Yeah,
Melissa, I just spoke at. She is amazing. The conference was amazing. For those of you that don't know, it's like such a fun one to go to for sure.
yeah, and I was just learning about Steamy Lit and kind of what she's doing with that company, and I think that it's so cool. Like romance books and vibrators in a quarterly subscription box. That's like amazing. But I can see where I like your name pops up a lot in collaboration with other people I'm talking to. And I love seeing that because you can just genuinely tell that you are passionate and you are willing to bring other people along in the journey and uplift other people. And I just find that so refreshing in comparison to a lot of these big box brands that are in the sexual wellness space.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so cool. I need to have a follow up with Melissa just to like once again tell her like how cool it was to be in that space. I've never been to like a romance novel celebration event like that. But we do, I feel like that's part of the intentionality of it. If we do a partnership, it's because we really want to and it's a good fit, you know? And I know at the end of the day, like it's helpful for people to like have variety. So I
Mhm.
like collaborating with my peers as well. Like I don't feel like we're in competition. Retailers feel differently. But it's like all of us kind of are like raising this tide together. So I like partnering. I like being like knowing who's in the space and seeing how we can help each other.
Yeah, I think that's it's fun for me as a, as a freelance writer and also like doing this podcast to be able to connect with all of these different people in the space and see how they are connected and working together because genuinely everyone is working on the same goal, which is to normalize sex and sexual wellness and pleasure. I when I first started doing the work that I do, there was a lot of judgment from people that I knew. Like, why are you putting this online? Why are you putting yourself out there in this way or writing personal sexual experiences for millions of people to read? And it is all because I want to normalize sex and happiness and sexual pleasure. And I think that folks who are from many different backgrounds have the ability to do it. It's just about getting there. And the more that we talk about it and the more that brands like Bloomi exist, the more that that can happen.
I have read so much of your work, and I have to tell you the fact that you're not only doing sex education, but you're doing sex education and like being vulnerable to share a personal lens in a lot of it, I think is very, very powerful. And I often say this like, it would be amazing to have like a variety of narratives of pleasure out in the world. And I feel like there are some, like yours is definitely one of them, but it does normalize. It does help people say, oh my gosh, like they went through this. I went through a version of that too. Or, oh, now I'm really curious about what they said in this piece. So I think it's incredibly important and vulnerable. I know it's tough. Even for me as as the founder of this brand, I don't share that much personal stuff. Of course, I'll say like, okay, yeah, I'm a fan of self pleasure, and here's a little bit of the routine that I like, or I'll do things like that. But it's um, it's like I'm almost bringing the stories together, bringing the like education, and you're being like really powerful in being vulnerable.
Thank you so much. I try my hardest, and as a writer, I'm trained in nonfiction writing, and I'm writing a memoir. And one of the things that I was told in doing my MFA was if you don't feel uncomfortable with what you're writing, usually it's not the thing that you should be writing. So I look at it from
Oh my
that lens,
gosh.
like what can I actually put out there that's a little scary for people to read, but ultimately I know will help others. Like the things that I write about tend to be what I would have needed help with, before having the experience. And I couldn't find anyone talking about it. So I try to put it out there in that way. And it's been so fun. It's been such a journey. And I love getting to meet folks who read my work or people who are doing amazing things and figuring out a way to collaborate. And I was so happy when you agreed to be on the podcast because I really enjoyed meeting you the first time.
Same. I knew that we would eventually do more things together. I was like, okay, I love the work you're doing. I think it's really special when someone is able to be an educator through their own lens, even. I think I wish there was more of it. Um, and yeah, I just think overall, I think there's so many ways that people who are willing to share their story, like they can make a difference. Even if they share stories about not feeling comfortable with something, or like if they share, I'm reflecting on this experience, that's powerful. Just like the reflection of it can be really important. And I have to tell you that advice that you got, it's so interesting. I think it's very true, and it's hard, I think, in the work we're doing. I just gave my first like keynote speech in Spanish, and I was reflecting yesterday on it was Spanglish, like half Spanish, half English, like intentionally. But when I was doing that, I feel like something new happened on stage. I've done a lot of talks, I've done a lot of like education work, but I felt really vulnerable. I shared like pieces of my story. It wasn't about Bloomi, it was about me, and Bloomi is part of me, but it's not like the majority of me. And I think being able to do that in two languages and being really vulnerable, like I felt like that was the most like wide open I had been in a long time with like who I am. And I feel like you're probably doing that in the work you're doing all the time. But I can't tell you how many people came up to me after. People were crying. It was just this, like, in the way people would hug me after, it felt like a mom hug. It felt like, it was like, oh my gosh, give me a hug. You're doing so much work out there. So I think it is powerful. I feel like that is what you're doing when you're writing. And I feel like I'm starting to do some of that when I speak.
That is amazing. I commend anyone who does this type of work and is willing to be vulnerable, and let people in, because I think in this work, it's not just are you having sex or are you doing this or that. There's so much story behind people and why they're motivated to do what they do. And I find like the most touching things that I get to work on are things that have nothing to do with sex necessarily, but have something to do with my personal journey or my background or my parents' background. It's really cool when you see someone step up to the plate and do something differently. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes, but it's still challenging, of course.
Yes, yes, I definitely felt vulnerable sharing so much. And yeah, it felt good. It felt good. I recognize that feeling when you're talking about it. I'm like, oh yes, I definitely felt that.
Yeah. So when it comes to community, like fostering a community, how do you personally foster a community that's open to being vulnerable and asking questions?
Um, I feel like I make myself available on the education or the Q&A side as much as possible. So, uh, I for me, I feel very happy when I know that I'm educating. That's like my where my heart really is. So I do these events, for example, the one that you came to, and it's special to hear stories and as a community be able to like share experiences, and maybe I'll step in to give like, oh, here's the concept that kind of applies to this, and this is what I've seen works or doesn't work with that. And I think those spaces feel really special, but I can't do that with everyone. It takes a lot of energy for me to be traveling to cities and hosting events like that. So I try to be online a lot. And I do share like tons of little things on my personal social, like on Instagram. I'm trying to be better about TikTok. I used to put all my stuff on Bloomi's TikTok. And then we have Intimate Talk, which is our blog essentially for Bloomi that has a ton of guides, resources. I feel like that's been a cool hub of information. But I'm a little bit everywhere right now with education. Like I think I'm just trying to one stay like very grounded in the work that I'm doing and feel like I'm still like providing impact when I can talk to people personally. And then I think it's good for the world. This is our second time today going back to UC Berkeley, which is my alma mater. It's a welcome women in femme event. So we're going to give out vibrators, and it's just like there is no catch, you just have it, right? And I think people are very surprised by that. And I realize now, like for 95% of these young adults, like this is the first vibrator that they're having. So at the side of the giveaway, I'm also available for questions. And I just can't tell you, it makes me feel so happy to be able to help. Maybe you don't have a question, maybe you just like, want to follow Bloomi or me and just see like information that feeds out and that makes you feel good. But if you have a question, we try to answer it.
I love that. So my college experience was very much that as well. I went to a Cal State University, and they often had sex education events, which was so different from previously, having no sex education at all. They were really like at our orientation, they brought in a sex expert to talk to us about safe sex, which I thought was cool. And they often gave away stuff, but I do. I wish that Bloomi was on my campus, because my first vibrator was like a $15 like really terrible vibrator that I got at some seedy sex shop that like, and I knew nothing about vibrators and I was too nervous to ask someone for help. So I bought this one that like, it died within like 3 weeks. Like it was not
Oh my
great.
goodness. Oh
Um,
no.
um, but I think it's so cool, and the education component you can see are so passionate about, and so many people of so many different backgrounds and ages need this, and to keep going with it and pushing forward is amazing. Um, I wanted to ask you when it comes to Bloomi and the products that you have, can you say the top maybe like two or three that you love personally?
Oh my gosh, when people ask me this, it's so funny because it's hard. It's like almost like how do you pick a favorite out of your favorites? But what I will say is I have like seasonal favorites. Like what am I in the mood for right now or like what's on rotation right now? So I feel like right now I'm back to my water-based lube. I was oil for a while, maybe it was the summer, I don't know. But I love water-based lube being handy. I like having it like on my nightstand. I like having it in the shower. You just have to get creative to not have too much water splashing on you because it will wash off since it's water-based.
Mhm.
But it, what I love about it is it helps me be creative in my setup in the shower. Like I have to be really intentional about where things are placed or where I want to be. We have like a place to sit, as you can probably imagine, and a lot of shelf space. But that's, I feel like, my favorite. You can use it with the toys. You can use it by itself. For people that use like latex barriers, it's latex friendly. And then in terms of vibrators or other products, I'm really loving the newest product, but it hasn't launched. I'll tell you what it is because it'll be launching soon. It's a
Mhm.
vibrator that you can use on your body. It's more of a body product, and I'm
Oh.
loving it all over right now because I have a lot of like tension in my shoulders and I type a lot, so it's like it's been great for here. But then I have one in the shower and it's great for pleasure too. So I like the versatility of that. And then I think those two would be like my favorite ones right now. And I just have to say, I always travel with an arousal product. For me, it's just nice to have that in my intimacy kit and just like bring it with me. So that's nice. I'll bring like Bloomi arousal oil or the serum.
I've used the oil, the arousal oil, and I liked it a lot. And I'm not normally someone that likes like arousal products typically, because I find that they have like burned or felt weird in the past, and this one doesn't at all. I've actually recommended
Totally.
it to a few friends.
Oh, nice. Yes, I have to tell you, people should be cautious with arousal products because there's a lot of stinging ingredients that they'll put in them that make you feel hot, or they'll put a lot of mint in it or something that's like kind of a stinging component to it. It doesn't feel great most of the time. I had so many that I tried that stung and I was like, what is this feeling? This is not pleasurable to me. So yeah, ours is very different. It has aphrodisiacs, which help like naturally get the body going, but then it's like rich fatty oils and like oils that I really love that have that really beautiful glide. So we purposely don't have any like stinging agents in them.
Mhm. The other thing that you mentioned at the event I went to was a playlist. And I listened to the playlist that you sent over and I really loved it. Can you just kind of briefly talk about what the playlist is and how you think it could help people?
Yes. So sound is really powerful. We talked a little bit about sound at this dinner, and the specific thing that we talked about was just the hertz and how you can actually listen to erotic playlists that are in a specific like wavelength or hertz frequency that help stimulate the arousal part of your body and help you feel like you're getting in the mood. So I shared the playlist and we can also link it here if you want. I just found it based on like Googling the different like which playlists are at 500x hertz or
Mhm.
and what I found is that it helps you not only vibration goes through the body, right? We're mainly made up of water. So when we're listening to like a sound bath, you can feel that throughout your body. So when you're listening to these playlists that are made at these different frequencies, it allows you to really tap into like the feelings that you feel like in the genital area, and you start to feel warmer, and it just kind of lets you calm down. So find them very nice to listen to before a date night or when you really just want to relax. And I think the group enjoyed it. I also talked about how like a lot of piano music can be arousing, reggaeton, which is why like there's a good beat to it, but really there's a lot of frequency information behind it that people may not know about. And I think with sound, we also talked about how when you're having intimate moments, being okay with allowing like your authentic sound to come out is something that not everyone is doing or feels comfortable in. So sound itself, just like in an authentic way, the way that like you sound is very powerful to just like be. And a lot of times people will inhibit because, again, roommates, neighbors, kids, and they're trying to quiet it down. But we talked about finding times and places where you can just be and you're okay with having that natural sound.
Yeah, I think also that's just, whether you're by yourself or you have a partner or partners, like sound is, most people love it. And if you can be in a space to be free and let yourself kind of, emote and let go, I think that that's definitely going to enhance your sexual experience. Um, so
Yeah, for
where
sure.
can people find you? Where can people find you online? Where should they follow you?
Oh, they can find me any social. Me personally, I share a lot about like my entrepreneur journey and just like education. Rebecca Alvarez Story is my Instagram or TikTok and my website. And then on Bloomi, you can follow us at the Bloomi. That's also our website, thebloomi.com. But we really are encouraging folks to help with this normalization of intimacy by shopping Bloomi at Target. If you go to Target and you are supporting, us, Latina owned brand, emerging brand, it shows big box retailers that we should continue to be on shelf, that companies like ours should be on shelf, but also it helps you have a cool product and have that pleasure product that's healthy and you can just enjoy yourself.
Yeah, as someone who's used Bloomi products, I can highly recommend. And like I said, I've given some away to friends, which has been so nice and gotten good feedback. So if you're out there listening, absolutely go to Target, pick up Bloomi, try a few things out because I think they're all a little bit different and can be used differently, and you can really explore yourself in different ways. But yeah, I think conversations about basics and 101 sex are so important. And I'm really happy that you were able to join me today. And I just think the work you're doing is incredible. And I'm excited to continue watching your journey.
Oh, thank you, Haley, for having me and for starting such a cool podcast. We are mission aligned.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And for anyone listening, follow Rebecca, follow Bloomi, and be sure to stay tuned for seeing more collaborations, hopefully in the future together.
Thank you.